But then a strange thing happened. One month, the hidden army, which had mushroomed, suddenly stopped growing. The following month was even more disturbing. The papers reported a slight falling off in production. Some were too tired in the morning to face the assembly line or the workbench. Some found that defense work interfered with their shopping. A few members of the hidden army, it seemed, had earned enough for the fur coat they coveted and returned to their pre-war existence. Perhaps the war news looked swell and the compulsion to work was dissipated in the confident talk of victory just around the corner. Others quit for sounder reasons. Transportation was a problem. It was distressingly difficult to be both a housekeeper and a patriot. The kids needed looking after, and the house somehow refused to run itself when 8 hours a day were spent at the plant. But by far the most common reason was that women were not accustomed to the long hours of hard work. Shortages appeared. American planes found themselves lacking bearing assemblies. Delicate parts for electronic equipment were low, and American wounded became American dead. Of a sudden, the war was right in the American home. The government regrets to inform...
No, no.
What's the matter? What's the matter?
For every American cross driven into the foreign earth, a gold star hung in some American home. Our women learned in bitter tears and heartache that in war there can be no such thing as a slight falling off in production, because there's no such thing as a slight death. By early 1944, the draft quotas were falling behind. The demands for young men for the new invasion forces were imperative. These young men had to come largely from the deferred, the fathers, those doing essential industrial work. Reclassification was called for. This at a time when stories drifted in from the cold Italian mountains, the malaria-ridden Pacific jungles, the watery graves. Women the country over began to recognize war for what it was, a grim, tough, unromantic battle to the death, in which every man, woman, and child had a stake. If the American home is to be preserved, if the tragedies of other families in tortured lands are not to be duplicated here, the Axis must be brought to its knees. The hidden army drew fresh recruits. Its ranks grew to nearly 18 million. Many of these women came from walks of life not previously considered. The mothers, the young, the aged. When they were asked why they had joined the ranks of the hidden army, these women gave a variety of reasons.
I have a daughter in the waves, and I had a son on the Arizona. That's a good enough reason for anyone.
I'm an old maid, and I didn't have anyone until I took this defense job. Now, I have a family of 10 million to look after. I send them cases of these every week to help them to get home soon.
I go to college, but I arranged my classes so that I could help out in the war effort. This way I'll get my diploma and war bonds.
I was too heavy for the wax, so I joined up in defense work. Yesterday was the big day of my life. The foreman told me I was worth my weight in gold.
My husband's a prisoner of the Japs in the Philippines. If he'd had a few more of these shells out in Bataan, maybe he'd still be fighting. Whenever I get a bit tired, I think of him on that death march.
The special needs of women workers were more widely recognized in many vital defense areas. For mothers, child care nurseries. For housekeepers, stores and markets were persuaded to stay open evenings. Hairdressers, dances, movies, sports were more and more made available at the unaccustomed hours required by the hidden army. Indeed, in some bands, much of the routine of contemporary living was made easier for the woman war worker than for her stay-at-home sister, because it was concentrated under the one roof. There was no longer the necessity to traipse all over town for her dental appointment, her driver's license, her ration coupons. They were all within a few yards of the assembly line. More and more, the special needs of women workers were realized and met. Oh yes, there was another girl we canvassed for her reason for entering war work.
Why did I take a defense job? That's a funny question. I never thought of that before. Do you have to have a reason? We're in a jam, aren't we? I'm sorry, but you'll have to excuse me. I'm too busy to answer damn fool questions like that.
Somehow that answer pleased us. No sudden emotional urge sent this young woman into war work. No loss of a loved one. No temporary economic embarrassment. No mere yearning for excitement or novelty. Democracy is in a jam. There are millions like her. There will have to be. 18 million women aren't enough. As more men are called for military service, their places must be taken by women. We are forced to face casualties at the front, but never again, as during 1943, can one woman quit for every two who are hired. There's no time to be spent in the constant training of new replacements. Without the help of additional thousands of women, we cannot build the mountains of materiel consumed in global invasion. We cannot make good the millions of man-hours and woman-hours that are lost in a fleeting second's smoke and flame. As long as the Nazi cancer exists anywhere in the world, this is also a woman's war, to be waged so that no woman shall ever again clutch a starved baby to her breast, so that no woman anywhere shall ever be the slave of a fascist state that makes her no more than a brood mare. That is why the women of America, like the men at their side, must flock to war jobs and stick to their jobs until that day when an end has come to the devastation of the earth. When men again may safely go down to the sea in ships. That day when peace has come once more to all lands, and especially to the land at whose gate stands the finest warrior, the greatest woman of them all.